Oh, I wasn't hooked. Okay, we have approval of agenda.
We'll make a motion to approve agenda as read.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Roll call.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any public comment time? Now's the time to step forward if you have anything you want to address the council on. I know you're all waiting to come up with your presentation, so. Okay, we'll move on. Management reports. We have a budget workshop. And here comes our council member. Alvarado is joining us at this time. Management reports for the budget workshop, number 3, fiscal year 2021-2022.
So the American Council, this evening, we're pleased to present to you the draft proposed budget. Each of the directors will have an opportunity to present their respective department budget to you. The format we will follow in that presentation is department accomplishments for the fiscal year 2021, goals for 21-22, follow with the department budget. They'll explain any differences in their budget, any expenditures are exceeding the proposed budget, and then they'll also have a slide to talk about additional requests that they're asking of council for consideration. A point on that is that we're not asking you to make a decision on those this evening. We're presenting them to you at the next council meeting. Those items will come back, and then you can have deliberations on which of those items you're willing to approve. And then the last item in the presentation is a new topic, which is future budget discussion items. The departments will be presenting to you items that they see occurring in their department for future budget consideration. Those items are not being asked of you to be considered at all. It's just items for future budget discussions, as the title states, for us to be able to put them on your radar, and so that we can continue to have those discussions well into the future. So I'll leave that to what the departments will present. The proposed budget this evening is consistent with your direction. As you know, last year's budget was right in the midst of the COVID pandemic, and we basically took a budget approach to maintain public safety, economic development, and employee wellness. As you know, we were in the pandemic. There were a lot of unknowns at the time of what could happen or couldn't happen. Every indication at the time was our economy was going to take a hit. Both economists and even the League of California Cities were making predictions that our revenues were going to decrease. We're fortunate that, as we've seen even at the state level, that they did not get hit at the significant number that they thought, neither did we. Our revenues actually tracked a little bit better than what we originally projected of that $4 million deficit. So keeping with council direction, as we continue to recover from the pandemic, this proposed budget continues to maintain the current service levels as we have in the prior years. It continues to focus on infrastructure, public safety, for example, consistent with your direction. And so while the dollar amount has increased, the levels of service have not. There's no cutbacks, there's no reduction of service. It's basically maintaining the same levels of service as we have for the current fiscal year. One of the things that we are looking in this budget is start building our organizational capacity. As you know, we have a significant amount of housing development projects approved to take place over the next 7 to 10 years. Gossamer Grove alone is over 3,000 units. Mission Lakes is approximately another 4,000 units. And here in the core city, we have approximately another 1,500 units. So foreseeably, over the next 7 to 10 years, we're going to see a considerable amount of growth in the city as it relates to housing. I think the 2030 general plan called out a full build out, a population of approximately 80,000, which we're not anywhere near that, but that's what the figure was estimated in the city's general plan. But if you take just the 10,000 approximate units that are planned already, 3.2 residents per household, that's easily another close to 30,000 residents that we can foresee as part of our community. With that comes, as you heard me say, every new house brings additional demand from public safety, whether it's additional calls for service, It's another water meter we have to maintain, additional streetscape, sidewalks, trees, whatever it may be. So as we continue to grow, one of the things that we're looking at as an organization is how we're going to maintain and or address that service level. That service demand, because our residents are going to expect that we continue to maintain our roads to a certain satisfactory level, maintain our public safety levels. And so one of the things we're looking at in our budget is how do we going to build that organizational capacity, i.e. service levels, to meet that service demand. So we realize too that with that, more importantly, is how we're going to pay for it. The revenue that comes with that. Mayor Prout and several of you have always brought up the fact that yes, we recognize that we have growth, but we do need all that additional revenue to be able to pay for those things. We're a service-oriented organization, meaning we provide a service. We don't sell or manufacture a product. And so ultimately the people are the ones who provide that service to our residents and to our community. We are building our budgets and how we're going to meet that service growth and start preparing. And so that's what we're looking to having a conversation with you as we present our budgets. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. Bryce will lead off with giving you a high-level overview of where we are with our budget, revenue to expenditures. It is a balanced budget, we're pleased to say, and we are projecting a year-end surplus for next fiscal year. And then that will be followed by each of the department directors making our presentation. It is an interactive process. So as you're going through, the directors are making their presentations. We ask you, if you have questions, please engage the directors with any of the questions you have. And we'll be happy to answer those and engage in that dialogue. So with that, Bryce, go ahead.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. Just a brief overview of the agenda. We'll be talking about the budget overview and fund summaries, followed by the general fund balance assignments. We'll look at the two items that are driving the cost increases, the most: personnel costs and internal service fund charges. And then we'll begin our department budget presentations after that. So we begin with our citywide budget overview. So on the screen above is a graph looking at 55.7 million in expenditures. Of this, the general fund is about 29.7 million. Internal service funds are about 3.5 million. As mentioned in a previous study session, they get their funding from charges to other departments. So if you take those out, that's 52.2 million. Enterprise funds make up the other 10.8 million. Special revenue funds, 8.6 million, and then 3.1 million from our capital project funds. Moving on to our fund summaries, starting with the general fund and running across the very top row. We're looking at a beginning fund balance projected now of 63.8 million, 31.2 million in revenue, operating expenses 18.2 million. We have capital projects totaling 11.5 million. Of that amount, 10.3 million is developer revenue sharing agreement payments. We're projecting now to receive 162,500 from the supplemental law enforcement fund for the police department. And then we're budgeting at this point a total surplus of 1.6 million, bringing up the end funding balance to 65.4 million.
I'm trying to follow along with both. They don't match.
Correct. So we ended up finding there's a couple of items. One, you'll notice the beginning fund balance is higher in this projection. In the draft budget document, the code enforcement projected budget was catching the column to the right as well as sum total. And so it's artificially causing that expenditure item to be high. And so the beginning fund balance is adjusted. The other item that you'll see is in the operating expenditures. We have a reduction in personnel costs in the city manager's budget. And so you'll see an adjustment to that as well. And that'll be discussed briefly. So on the second bottom section here is enterprise funds. All the enterprise funds except for transit are drawing down their fund balances. So you notice in the second to last column is our surplus. All of them are showing deficits except for public transit. For water and wastewater funds here at the top of that set, you can see that they're related to the capital project expenditures here in the bottom. For refuse, it's part of the cost increase is the capital projects, but we're also covering some from operating costs as well. Considering that the rate plan included about $4 million in loans to the enterprise funds to help offset rate increases, and that hasn't had to be used yet, is a compliment to council and staff for keeping those costs for the 5-year plan down. Communications rail budgets are at the bottom as well. They require more expenditures and revenues being generated. Staff is still working on the options to propose to council to address these for the future of the enterprise funds. So was it going too fast?
It's fine. It's just, like, super small print.
Gotcha.
I guess I'm not as young as I once was, so it's hard to see it. I just don't want to admit that.
No worries. So the next set are our special revenue funds. And so just the landscaping and lighting districts and the North Park, North Shafter Assessment District do have operating expenditures. Sorry, I hit the wrong button. Come on. At the top here in this column here, so $800,000 for landscape and lighting district and about $13,000 for North Park fund. Aside from that, supplemental law enforcement fund has $162,000 for transfers. In this column here, aside from that, all the other expenditures for the special revenue funds are all geared towards capital projects. And we'll be going over those as part of the department presentations going forward. The funds for congestion management, police grants, asset forfeitures, downtown business improvement district, and the low mod income housing do not have any planned uses this year. For capital projects funds, we have traffic mitigation here at the top with about $3 million in expenditures for the West Beltway project, and is the only fund planning to use fund balance from prior years. And so you notice the deficit here of 1.3 million. Again, it ends with an ending fund balance of 9.4 million even after that expenditure. All the other capital projects are building their fund balances. The only other expenditure we have in the capital project funds is $111,000 in the wastewater capital improvement project fund. This is a carryover of an appropriation for the Southeast Shafter Sewer Extension project. There's not actually a planned use for the funds. We're just keeping it appropriate in case unforeseen costs and arise from the end of that project. So at the end of the next year, unless something comes up, those funds will be then, the appropriation will then be released at the end of the year. Our last set for the fund summaries is our internal service funds. All of these are operating expenses, no capital projects or transfers for all 4 funds, and they're fully recovered from departments through the internal service fund charges. So we'll be talking about the internal service fund charges here momentarily. So the next slide is talking about our assigned and unassigned general fund balance. At the end of the fiscal year, we are projecting an ending fund balance will be $65.4 million. Of that amount, we're projecting 1.3 million as non-spendable items. We have 3.1 million proposed for assignment to cover the negative balance from the corrections funds. Other funds negative balances are now projected at 2.7 million. The State Board of Equalization loss contingency is remaining at just shy of $16.5 million. This is the same amount that was budgeted for the fiscal year 21 amount. We have $4 million for the loans available to other funds, namely the enterprise funds. And then we have an allocation for future capital projects. We have that increased up to $12 million based on the draft capital improvement plan. These assigned balances leave an unassigned fund balance of 25.7 million. That's about 86.5% of the total general fund expenditures being proposed. which is well in excess of the 50% policy level requirement. I believe there was one question about the
So, Mayor and Council, really quick, something to consider, this evening, but of that unassigned fund balance of 25.7 is consideration to move some of that money into the State Board of Equalization loss contingency. It's been a couple years since we've moved money into that fund. And so our recommendation would be to move some of that 25.7 dollar amount into the loss contingency in the event ultimately we have to pay back any sales tax because of the ongoing matter involving Williams-Sonoma.
Even that may not be enough.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. But it just allows us, as the city has done in the past, is to set money aside and continue to build on it.
So the next slide is discussing the personnel cost increases and decreases and the causes going into that. So some items that are increasing our personnel costs, again, we have some step increases of employees that are happening this year as part of their merit increases. We are making up for some reductions in the fiscal year 21 budget. As kind of mentioned before, we only have the final amounts for each line item from the previous budget process. But we did notice that multiple departments had salary reductions in the fiscal year 21 budget without having any of the chilled positions being within that department. So a couple examples: city clerk, 84,000 was reduced down to 76,000 budget, but there were no chilled positions there. We also had HR had $11,000 decrease despite no chilled positions and employees that were eligible for step increases in this past year. And so this is actually throughout finance, planning, engineering. Most of them have that. So we're making up some of that reductions and then have any step increases that were entitled in the previous year, plus this year's. Additionally, we have included some compensation increase included for labor negotiations. We are not stating the amount publicly as would jeopardize the city's negotiation position going forward. We also have some position reallocations, health insurance benefit increases, and then workers' compensation increases as well. So on this slide is the personnel cost increase breakdown from the general fund. When you look at it, it's each department by row with columns for total increase, and then moving to the right, total salaries and stipends, share of that, then benefits, workers' compensation, and finally contractors converted to part-time employees. And this is specifically for the education partnership department. At the bottom row are the combined totals. So the total personnel cost increase in the general fund is 1.6 million. Just to point out a few departments, so you'll notice the city manager. There we go, city manager's department. This is relocation of the chief of corrections and the city manager portion from the economic development, which drives up all three categories since one of that position reallocations was not in the general fund to begin with. We have education partnership. That's the big 118,500. This is a requirement from recent legislation where the contract instructors are now considered part-time employees. So that's an increase. We've basically moved that line item from operating expenses up into personnel. Economic development saw reductions from the relocation of 20% of the city managers and 50% removal of the project manager. We're also seeing police services, large expenditures. That's driven primarily because of the large number of employees that department serves or has serving in it. So the cost figures are high, but when you split across all three columns, about 5% in each category. And finally, the building department is higher with the addition of the building inspector 2 position. If there are any questions, I'll move on to the internal service funds. So internal service fund charges are increasing. Some of this is an inflationary cost and personnel costs, namely. We also have an impact from the closure of the modified community correctional facility. So internal service funds have the same costs to provide the service. but we're having less funds to share them across. So IT is an example. There's no reduction in staffing or the service and supplies, but they're no longer able to share those costs across with MCCF. And so what ends up happening is that it gets spread across less departments, and so the cost for each department increases. So on the screen are the internal service fund charges for the general fund departments. For the building maintenance and vehicle shop charges, these first two columns on the left-hand side, you'll notice that there's generally consistent 4% increase and an 11% increase for each of the departments. And now there's an exception to that, which is engineering services. You notice a big increase, 311%, and then a big decrease here. And I believe what happened at the last year's budget is those numbers were transposed. And so this is basically reverting them back to where the proper line item to the number. For the building maintenance, I'm sorry. So IT and liability costs, however, you'll see the changes are significantly different. And this is because their cost shares are calculated differently than the other two. So IT is based on a formula weighing the number of computers, the number of staff, and the hours worked by IT. Given that MCCF had a large share of the IT costs, nearly $278,000 last year, that large share is now being spread out among the remaining departments. So larger employees and computers in each department drive higher costs for those departments compared to the others, which is why you see in this case, police services is probably one of your biggest ones, $100,000 increase in IT, $13,000 increase in its liability line items. You also see departments where you have new staffing, so buildings going up, 22,000 or 171% in their line item, so it's 18% in liability. Same with city manager. Education partnership also, especially on the liability side. And our liability costs are split 40% of total cost to general fund, 60% of cost to non-general fund. Within the general fund, the portion is divided by total personnel costs. On the non-general funds, it's split across total expenditures. And so that's the basis of what's driving those internal service fund charge increases that you'll see in each department's budget. So at this point, that's the overview, and we'll go ahead and move into department budget presentations.
Any questions on the overview before we go into? No? Okay, thank you, Mayor.
When are we looking to get a new draft book?
So after this evening, we'll have a new one for the June 1st meeting. And then that'll take into consideration, not that reversion, but from that meeting, if there's any additions that council approves from tonight, then that'll be updated. And then the final version of the June, I think, 15th, that will be the final draft. So there'll be one more draft version
Before
on June
June
1st,
15th.
and then the final
Okay.
draft for the June 15th.
Thank you.
All right, so Mayor and Council, now we get into department directors. Just want to say that some of the goals and achievements you'll hear are just some high level ones. They're not all encompassing of all the work that the departments do. So I'm leading off this evening. Just a few accomplishments. The accomplishments to note is obviously we had the pandemic that we had to deal with. And so the city manager's office navigated the organization through that incident. One of the other highlights for the executive management team is we instituted a weekly executive leadership team meetings with all the directors that not only talk about the agenda and plan for it, but policy matters and administrative matters and organizational matters as it affects the organization. Something new that I established with the mid-management team, a rather small one, but it's quarterly meetings with them to keep them informed and also share information with them. They're also our future. Some of these will hopefully promote up to director positions at some point in their careers. Looking to continue the virtual meet and greet with staff in the community. And we did enhance, I think this is something we can be very proud of, is enhancement and increasing the communication and community engagement, utilizing all our city media platforms to get our word out. And then obviously we had the last incident in late last year with the ransomware taken incident. Some of the goals consistent from what we've talked about is continue to improve Shafter as an attractive place, Obviously foster and engage in employee organization culture, continue to enhance our community engagement platforms, obviously could successfully look to implement your strategic objectives and continue to strive possession of the MCCF facility, which later this evening, you'll hear how we've been successful to secure the former facility for city control. And then obviously develop a long-term sustainable library services, which on the June 1st council meeting, you'll have a recommendation from staff and the council ad hoc committee on this matter, which is all moving in the right direction in terms of being able to provide long-term sustainable library services to the community. Our budget, it continues to maintain the same level of service. The one change is in personnel, as you've heard our finance director mention, is this position actually is going to not change. Our chief of corrections has shared with me that after a 28-year career, Paul, 28 years? 32, sorry, my math was off. Exemplary career with the city of Chapter. He plans to retire January 3rd of 2022. And he looks forward to his retirement life, being that the facility is now closed and there's some things he wants to do in his personal life, like a lot of golfing, lucky him. And this position that is actually not going to be created. He will remain the chief of corrections through the duration of his career with us. He will oversee the audit with CDCR. They still need to come down, take inventory of all their belongings of equipment and close out the final books with them. And now that looks like we will have possession of the facility, work with me to help and our economic development director for a suitable tenant or a project that may be able to come in and better utilize that. So this is only the personnel cost for half a year for Paul's salary and benefits that will be transferred into the city manager's office. He will remain chief of corrections up until through his retirement date of January 3rd, 2022. In the city manager's office, there is one minor request, and that is to reclassify our administrative assistant to the communications community engagement manager. I think you've seen a significant increase in the manner in which we are engaging our community with a weekly newsletter, Chapter What's Up. A lot of information being posted on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and a lot of engagement with our community. She also led the efforts working with the CSUB MPA class students with my understanding is one of the first ever community surveys to gauge resident satisfaction. And so this adjustment is approximately $18,000. A couple of future budget discussion items. As I said in my opening comments, we are definitely growing. And one of the things we should be looking to do is an organizational assessment to look at where our gaps are that we need to start filling, whether it's more police officers, fire services, public works, and not necessarily authorize those positions, but start planning for them and start identifying those gaps we need to fill. With that, would be looking at the organizational structure of our city organization to look for succession planning and create promotional opportunities for our staff as we continue to look of how do we retain, not only attract good quality and qualified and competent employees, but also how do we retain them from keeping them from go elsewhere. And with that, it's important for us to look at succession planning and promotional advancement. Okay, now I'm going to hand it off to Education Partnership.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the Shafter City Council. This year, our accomplishments have been primarily about mitigating the effects of closed schools, closed learning center. I don't have to tell you that we are going to be dealing with the after effects of this year socially, emotionally, and educationally in our children for years to come. And our efforts were focused this year on mitigating the damage. And so in the course of that, we came up with some new ways of serving the community. We transitioned to online tutoring and classes, and had attendance of just under 5,000 or just under 4,500 students. We had a summer reading academy online focused on young readers and small group reading. We offered curbside service for Learning Center for the Learning Center bookstore. We distributed books through our book bank, which we've done in years past, but basically volunteers that put books out into the little library network come and get a big group of books from us and to help get those books out. We created and distributed home learning kits. These were topical activity kits that families could do together. They included books, but also educational games and projects. And we also responded to the need to create a safe environment in the various stages of opening and closing of the Learning Center. The GAF Learning Center project restarted after being closed during COVID, and we're continuing to make good progress on that. Looking to complete that this year, early in the fiscal year. And we recruited our inaugural class of Chapter BC scholars. We had 12 students take advantage of the scholarship. This year, we're putting a real effort into recruiting students and helping them get through the application process. We have close to 50 who we have some contact with this year, and we're hoping to get most of those through the process and into the program. So the goals for the coming year are to complete the Learning Center expansion, to complete the process of restoring library service, and to complete the reopening of the Shafter Learning Center. So I'm hoping that we can get back to something resembling normal very soon. The budget, there's no change in the level of service, as Mr. Atkins mentioned. There is a change in the way in which our staffing is accounted for. This is the irony of California legislation, that the law that was passed was designed primarily for for gig services around driving. And then later that was the one area that was excluded from the law, and it continues to apply to our teachers, unfortunately. And then we're returning to a full year of in-person instruction. Future budget discussion items, as the city manager mentioned, we'll be discussing the library at the end of this fiscal year, and responding to city growth. And I want to say here, this doesn't mean necessarily more money in the budget. Some of this is going to be, in fact, a good portion of it is just thinking differently about how we provide service. So something that we learned this year out of necessity was how to how to deliver services in a different virtual way. Our city is growing not only in numbers, but in dispersion geographically, and that's a challenge for education. A third point is broadband access. That's also, this year has really driven home the importance of quality, available access to the internet. All of these three areas, in one way or another, are related to funds that are going to be available through the American Recovery Plan. Those are one-time dollars, so this is something that we have to be very wise about. But as a city in the past, we've tried to use one-time dollars to not only address immediate needs, but to create efficiencies going forward, and that's how we'll be looking at that. And the guidance is still coming out about how those monies will be distributed and applied for, but that's something that I'm sure we'll be talking about in the future. So that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to.
David, just can you just elaborate a little bit more on the broadband access and what, because I know we spoke about that before in the past. I just want to hear what your take is on that.
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, one thing that we're looking at is the ability for people to access. We have broadband, we have fiber in some of our public spaces, and the Learning Center especially. But it's not really powerful enough to reach outside of the building. So with some additional money, we can boost the signal and make it possible for people to park in the parking lot and access broadband. You know, certainly there are other places, public spaces around town, parks and so on that would benefit from something similar. So.
Thank you.
The one question I had, are you prepared with summer school? I mean, we have a full-blown summer school program coming forward.
We have a full-blown summer school program that's in development, yes. And we've had some difficulty hiring teachers. I have to say, we're going to be doing interviews again. But we do have a summer school program, and we're looking to push it back so that we will have fewer restrictions and have more capacity. But yes, we are planning to have in-person summer school at the Learning Center. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. Before you, we have the budget for the City Clerk Department. Some of the accomplishments we want to know is we conducted the nomination period and the November 3rd, 2020 general election for 3 city council seats, incumbents Gilbert Alvarado and Chad Givens, and newly elected council member Pete Espinoza took office December 15th of 2020. And one of our bigger accomplishments for myself is conducting city council and planning commission meetings as virtual meetings via Zoom for 7 months. And we did hybrid meetings for 2 months last year. Some of our future goals are to develop a citywide document retention program. And we would also like to codify Title 16 subdivision manual and the Title 17 zoning manual as part of the municipal code, and it would be available online. And we'd also like to research and develop an implementation plan for an agenda management software, excuse me. Here we have the budget for the City Clerk Department with our proposed personnel costs at $145,000 and operations and maintenance at $134,000 for a total of $279,000. Some of those differences from last year are due to salary increase due to merit steps and increases. And some of our future budget discussions are the agenda management system and Title 16 subdivision manual and Title 17 zoning ordinance manual codification. That concludes my presentation for the City Clerk Department. I am available for any questions.
Mine's not just a question. It's just, Esmeralda, you've done a great job this past year
Oh, thank you.
with everything I mean, the entire staff, but
Yeah.
putting this together, keeping us in line, you've done a great job. Your staff's done a great job as well.
Thank you. It's a
Congratulations.
team effort. It truly, truly is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob, that was really fast.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the Shafter City Council. Let's talk about economic development. Our accomplishments in this year, however challenging, we still wound up with some good things to talk about. The Countryside Car Wash is purchasing the city land, formerly Brookside Deli, that to develop their second location and a new deli and market. We're not sure of the exact design yet. That is scheduled to close escrow on June 18th. And we seem to be on the pace for that. We also completed buy and sell transactions with the Shafter Parks and Recreation Department for providing them over 40 acres of private property to develop into new sports facilities. And you will also recall that out of that property, the city retained over 8 acres of frontage property on Laredo Highway for future development in its supreme location. We also established the Business Expansion, Attraction, and Retention Fee Reduction Pilot Program for new and existing downtown core businesses. And I understand from our building department that we do have about 6 participants already in that at various levels. Of course, the car wash will become the biggest participant in that and get the benefit of that as far as attracting business here. I also actively participated in the Boundless Bakersfield and Beautiful Kern B3K program, economic development. It's getting a lot of press right now in the newspaper and across media. So I'm very active in that. That gives us some great contacts, some potential business, and some real benefits to Shafter. I was also participated in the Caltrans Freight Academy current EDC and other development efforts that I can appear in. I also increased the marketing of Shafter through podcasts, newspaper articles, radio and TV, wherever I could go. And now I'm back to doing some in-person presentations to service groups to further our cause. As far as my budget, as a one-person department, it's pretty simple. And the reductions were and I do have allocations from other departments. And so the reduction in costs there are in personnel area. And that was just that reallocation of individuals back to their home departments. Other than that, the expenses were lower than planned this past year, but those budgeted amounts were carried over. So we're in good shape. Finally, the goals that I have for our department, and obviously we need to generate revenue and keep on that path. So in that vein, we're going to create the first of in quite a while, a general economic development, a strategic plan with some specific initiatives for downtown core business areas, focusing on retail opportunities, offering consumer goods and services. We'll also hold public networking events for Wonderful Industrial Park and Minter Field tenants. I've already reached out to some of them. Look forward to including you council members and staff members as well. Some greater collaboration and communication within the city. Partner greater with the chamber to increase access to local businesses and to help build memberships. Also researching the transportation industry options and with the possibility of considering a professional operator for our rail operations. My predecessor had recommended this and we're beginning to make some contacts and find our potential there. Also continue to collaborate with commercial real estate agents, business brokers, site selectors, other financial professionals that I know to attract diverse companies with job opportunities that will be paying a livable wage for the residents of Shafter. Also to work to create workforce development for our residents and an initiative to advance their work skills, give them greater opportunities. There's county partners, there's other individuals willing to help, and hopefully we can begin some in-person meetings to accomplish those. Finally, we're going to look to market the excess corporate yard property and the saleable portion of the old corporate yard. These, plus the sale of Countryside and other potential sales, could generate 7 figures in income, or rather in dollar amounts, to the city. However, these are not really funds that should be used or considered for a budget. They should be used to set aside for reserves, and because they are assets that have be converted into cash and used for future projects and give us a greater cushion for the future to be able to have more potential. That would conclude my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have a comment. What about the facility now that we're going to have with the CCF building? Is that going to fall under you or all of us that we're going to find the possible greatest revenue producing?
Yeah, certainly, Mayor and
business?
Council. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
So that'll definitely be a topic of conversation to come back to council and having a discussion about what you envision for that facility. And then, obviously we will go out and execute what it is that we ultimately decide is the best and highest use for that facility. But now that the latest development is a Friday, until then, when this was prepared, we didn't know
right.
the future of it, but I think it changes the conversation. So it's definitely a conversation for us to engage you with. And ultimately, you as a council will give us input and direction.
Well, I might even think that I have an idea as what might generate revenue, but if we could have a way to put it out there, something might come forward that we had no idea or thought of that surpasses what I thought would be good. And yeah, we need to find a way to, I mean, KDC might even have some ideas, or even the WIP might have some ideas
Exactly. Right.
as to what we might generate. And that's the windfall that we really could come by.
Yes. And it's just it's centrally located in a very well
It's ideal for a lot of
ideal location.
possibilities.
Exactly.
good.
I think I can assure you that if we have an effort to publicly describe and celebrate and promote this, you can bet I'll be involved in that.
Good. We all will.
Yes. So it'll be very positive for us. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anything else I could answer? Yes.
Bob, I was curious about the The gun repair shop, what's happening with that? I haven't seen or heard any progress on that.
Councilmember Espinoza, what my last word was that they had decided not to follow through on that project. And so there's not been anyone else and checking with our planning department, nothing has happened there. I have been contacted by someone else actually with that same concept. So we'll continue to follow up on that.
So, okay, so we don't know why it hasn't been followed through?
No, I've come to learn that many times people have great ideas and then things just don't come together as they'd like. And they pull back from those. Sometimes it's not a no, it's just a not now. So, but I'm not aware of any specifics or timing from those folks.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, if I may, Councilmember Espinoza, we can send to you under a separate email some further information on why we believe they didn't go through. It had to do more so with their licensing, the type of federal license agent that they wanted to be and what they actually shared with us to what ultimately they wanted to do. It wasn't suitable for the zoned area that we're proposing to go into. But I'll be happy to share more information under a separate email with council on that.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Good evening. Sorry, can you hear me? Good evening, Mayor and council members of the Shafter City Council. HR's greatest accomplishment this year had to do with COVID-19. As we emphasized on the health and safety of the city's employees, my staff and I vigorously monitored COVID-19 employee illnesses and exposures. We stayed informed of the developments and guidelines provided by CDC, Cal OSHA, and state and local health departments. Additionally, any supporting documentation for job protected leaves and pay entitlements were processed in a timely manner. A health and safety committee was also established this past year, which they assisted with the establishment and implementation of the COVID-19 return to work protocols. Part of the human capital management and payroll components of Munis were implemented this past year, while certain components were delayed due to the ransomware incident. HR processes were updated to conform with the implementation of Munis, and the MOUs for SPOA and SEIU and the non-represented resolution were ratified successfully. Risk management was recently transitioned into HR, which assesses any risk and or liabilities against the city. And so with that, this upcoming year, it is part of my goal to obtain training in risk management and analyze any and improve any processes in risk management. Additionally, any delayed components in Munis will be implemented, including updating any additional HR processes to simplify the workflow. HR policies will be updated. Current forms will be converted into an electronic format, and the HR department webpage will be updated. Regarding the budget for HR, the total expenditures for the HR department are projected to be $411,923 by the end of this fiscal year, which includes $320,003 in personnel cost and $91,920 in operations and maintenance. The proposed amount for the 21-22 fiscal year is $456,544, which includes $332,619 in personnel cost and $123,925 in operations and maintenance. There are no changes in the level of service for HR, and any increase in the proposed budget is as explained by Mr. Atkins, which includes salary increases and maintenance cost increases such as janitorial, utilities, and internal ISF charges. Thank you for your time. I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Mayor, Council, next is the Financial Services Department presentation. The accomplishments for the Finance Department. We completed implementation of the payroll module in the new Enterprise Resource Planning System, or ERP. We've successfully hired a new accounting manager, Rocio Mosqueda, who's doing an amazing job. And then we've established a backup access system with our ERP provider and our IT department to continue financial and human resource system access while we have been put onto this backup system due to the ransomware incident. And just as a recent update, on May 25th and 26th, our systems will be returned back to the normal hosted site by Tyler after 6 months in this backup system. Looking at the goals for next year, the first is to recruit and hire a new administrative services director. The second is to complete implementation of the business licenses module for the ERP. A review and establish a new budget and accounting procedures to capitalize on the new ERP's features. Review alternatives and implement the best options for the city's purchase card system. And then complete ERP post-implementation adjustments and cleanup. The projected revenue for the Finance Department was increased nearly $40,000 in internal admin charges to the utility funds based on utility billing costs and the cost allocation plan. Personnel cost increases were mentioned in the earlier slide, and the vast majority of the operations and maintenance cost increases were tied to the internal service fund charges. The total net increased cost to the general fund is just short of $45,000. Finance is not making any additional needs requests. And that completes the presentation, and happy to respond to questions.
Honorable Mayor, members of the Chapter City Council, Wayne Clausen with the Planning Department. The Planning Department maintains both the general plan and the zoning ordinance. The Planning Department also manages a wide range of planning applications, from site plans and conditional use permits for residential, commercial, industrial development, as well as processing subdivisions for residential development. Our two notable accomplishments for the Planning Department this last year was with the help of a consultant that the city hired. The city prepared and released its draft environmental justice program as required by SB 1000. And the purpose of that program is to simply reduce health risks to the community. That's its sole purpose. And it's required to be included under the city's general plan. And the other required by SB 743 was to develop a draft strategy for vehicle miles traveled to be analyzed under some sort of CEQA threshold. And we prepared the draft. The environmental justice program was released to the public on January 5th of this year, and the city received comments from environmental justice groups on that program. City has not released the draft strategy yet for SB 743. We're still analyzing that and how it's going to work for the city. The Planning Department's goal for this next year is to complete the environmental justice program and have it adopted under the general plan, complete that strategy for vehicle miles traveled for a CEQA threshold, and update the city's adopted 2015 to 2023 housing element, and update it for the sixth cycle 2024 to 2032 8-year planning period. Let's see, the proposed budget for the Planning Department fiscal year 21-22 revenues is projected at $245,000. Personnel for expenditures, personnel costs is projected at $405,188. And operations and maintenance costs are projected at $128,982. in relation to the comments that the city received on the draft environmental justice program, city asked its consultant, what would it take to complete that program and addressing those comments? And the consultant submitted a cost proposal, approximately $200,000. Half that cost would be for generating additional studies to address the comments that were received. And then also prepare an environmental CEQA document to address those additional studies and the final proposed program. For future budget discussion items for the coming years, planning department needs an associate planner and or possibly another senior planner to maintain productive levels and processing and managing those development applications. And then to prepare a budget for the 2024-2032 housing element update and a budget to complete the environmental justice program under SB 2000 or 1000. Thank you. That concludes my report.
You will be sorely missed, sir. I will continue to say that. I don't, yeah. You are one of a kind, Wayne, and don't let anyone tell you differently. We're very thankful to have been around you, sir.
All righty. Honorable Mayor, members of the council, thank you for being here and doing what you do. As far as accomplishments go, I would say it's not up there, but I would say that continuing our level of service during COVID was likely our greatest accomplishment. I mean, our folks were out there every single day. It wasn't just police officers and animal control, but I had dispatchers coming to work. My records folks, my evidence folks, my administrative staff. So it was a good team effort, but that's likely our greatest accomplishment for sure. Beyond that, we continue to expand our footprint into the newest residential areas. Gossamer Grove is receiving attention on every shift now. It's something that we've grown into. And if you look at how much is being built out there, it's more to come, more of that to come. We've had the benefit of 1 full year of our traffic officer position, and he is doing a great job for us. Officer Nunez has been out there. I think he pulled 1,100 people over last year. Not everybody got tickets, but he's doing a fantastic job for us. Our K9 team, Officer Graves and Echo are out there and full bloom. They're helping to keep the community safe and the officers safe along with them. So we're glad they're out there. And I wanted to put this in there. We've added camera surveillance to the animal shelter. We have been hit a couple of times with some thefts out there. So even the police department has been affected by what's been going on. So, all right. Goals. We want to continue to expand our gang suppression capabilities by adding gang investigators to our collateral unit. That's not going to require new staff. We're going to send current staff to some extra training and make them gang experts. And the logic there will become obvious later in the presentation when I start talking about what's happening in and around the state. We're going to continue to expand our commitment to quality of life enforcement. And I would say to that, just about everything we do has a nexus to drugs. So all of the burglaries and the thefts and the scavenging and all of that part of what we do is all drug related. Almost every one of them has drugs or drug paraphernalia in their pockets. So we're going to make a concerted effort to not just on the traffic side of the house, but really in and around the greater Shafter area. We're going to try and affect some change in that area as well. I would really like to, when it's safe, to resume our Coffee with a Cop programs. And to be honest with you, no pun intended, but my guys and gals are thirsty for it. We haven't had public interaction. Our big events are they've been put to the side. I hear that we might have 4th of July shenanigans coming our way on July 3rd. We're hopeful that that's going to happen because we it's time for us to get back into the mix. And the last thing is we hope to re-implement our pet adoption events and rabies clinics. You will play a part in that, and that will become apparent in a couple of slides forward. As far as our budget is concerned, you will see that Bryce talked about the increases from last year and why there were increases. We are currently, I believe, the largest department in the city, so some of that makes sense. So it was to the tune of around $700,000 or more than that. All right, additional requests. The first three I consider to be more of a housekeeping, and the last three are personnel related. So I think they all warrant some discussion and consideration. The first is the purchase of 2 patrol vehicles. These patrol vehicles were not on last year's budget cycle. So if we excluded them on this budget cycle, we wouldn't have new cars until the 22-23 budget cycle. And it's not uncommon once we get approval to purchase vehicles that it takes anywhere from 9 months to a year to get that vehicle. So we could, if we limit ourselves and I don't get these cars, I might not see any new vehicles to our aging fleet until 2023. And that would be a kind of a hard pill to swallow for us. The second, that's about $150,000. Cars are getting very expensive these days. The second would be an increase to my overtime allotment as it relates directly to the investigator that I have on the HIDA drug task force. So in that the agreement in that drug task force, there was a built-in reimbursement of $19,500 annually. I'm asking for that $19,500 plus an additional a little better than $10,000 so that I can make sure that my investigator that's on the team can properly participate in all of their undercover and super secret stuff. And what's important there is that when the reimbursement happens, it doesn't come back into my line item. It goes into the general fund. So I'm having to kind of eat all of his overtime that he's accumulating these days. So it's really just moving in the shells that I'm asking for. The next thing, I'm looking for $40,000 to increase our vet services line item. And the premise there is that so that we can actually start adopting animals out again. And the way it is right now, due to COVID and probably a whole series of other reasons, the law requires that if we're going to adopt animals out, that they have to be spayed or neutered and chipped. So right now, none of the vets are taking appointments. So even if I had an animal that we wanted to adopt out, we can't get it spayed or neutered. So we've had to do a workaround, which is to bring in the mobile spay and neuter trucks. And that's important because they can come in, take a full day or two to do their business, and we can start the spay and neuter process with the animals that we do have on a regular basis. And the next would be personnel related. We've had a lieutenant position on the books chilled for several years now. The idea behind that chilled position, I presented in 2017 as a staff development effort to prepare my supervisors or my sergeants to be able to handle administrative duties in the future. In other words, to be mid-managers. So I'm asking that we unchill that position so that we have a good balance between a sergeant and a captain. It's also going to help prepare that person or those groups of persons that are lieutenants to be captains someday. It's all about staff development these days. The next is going to be to reclass my records clerk position. Also in 2017, we made a change in that area, and we took on a records clerk position with the intention of developing her and to give her added responsibilities and trainings and trainings that would get her to the spot to where she could be the supervisor of the unit. She has received training in national incident-based reporting systems, California incidents-based reporting systems, Racial Identity and Profiling Act data information. That's going to be important to us beginning in January of this next year. Every officer that makes a contact, a traffic stop, or speaking to anybody on the street is going to have to fill out a series of questions about what they thought the person's race was, et cetera. And it's going to be the clerk's job to be able to navigate all of that information and get it over to the DOJ, where they're going to chronicle and categorize what it is we're doing here. All right, and the last one is to add an assistant chief position. And to be frank with you, that's going to assist, that person's going to assist me with the continued formation of our supervisors and our management staff moving forward. That person will also be tasked with making sure that we work within the parameters of our budget. So to make sure that we're not overspending, and if we are, what we need to do, et cetera. So you'll note that I would like to make an internal promotion of one of my captains, and then I would chill that second captain's position. So the total on that one would be about $36,000.
Chief, is that for a short time, a short period?
Yeah, it should be for about 2 years.
2 years.
So it'd be like a 2-year agreement, and that should be just enough time for this person to help do all of those things.
Okay.
All right, future budget discussion items. I thought it was going to be important to discuss what we do know. We do know that last fiscal cycle, the state of California released thousands of criminals, all in the name of safety. So they released thousands and thousands of criminals from the state prison system back into our communities. And I don't know if you can feel it, but it has affected some change in almost every community in Kern County. They doubled down about a week and a half ago, and they suggested that they were going to release 76,000 more serious and violent criminals into the community. And, you know, I kind of pride myself by not having come before you previously and said the sky was falling. And I'm not saying the sky is falling here. But what I am doing is I'm waving the flag and letting you know that violent and serious criminals usually result in violent and serious crime. These folks are way more sophisticated than your garden variety criminals, and many of them have histories that are very, very serious. So I'm waving the flag and letting you know. Let's see, legislative changes are afoot, all related to police reform and transparency bills. This has also a lot to do with the reclassification of my clerk to supervisor, because the records component is going to have to kind of navigate all of those transparency issues related to police officer records and our backgrounds and all of that good stuff. There was even something proposed, an assembly bill that was proposed last year that's back on the table this year, that is asking that police officers, you can't hire a police officer unless they're 25 or they have a bachelor's degree. And that from a business perspective, from a purely recruiting perspective would be tough. That would be tough on us to be able to find candidates that have a bachelor's degree or are at least 25, because by the time they're 25, many have moved on to careers that they'll stay with for a while. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen. Let's see, we're all going to talk about community growth versus service demand. I think the city manager already talked about Gossamer Grove and Mission Lakes and the growth in and around the core. That's all going to require a gradual expansion of our patrol, our detectives, animal control, our wreckage unit, and our dispatchers who are already up to their eyeballs in alligators with trying to keep up with my motivated staff. My staff, and the city manager mentioned it a couple of sessions ago, about 70% of their arrests are all a result of personal activity. So they're not dispatched to a call. They initiate the activity themselves. So we're at about a 70%, 30% ratio. And other agencies, much of what they do, they're dispatched to. So they don't have the time to do a lot of this on-site activity. You know, I've been asked, what's the proof in the pudding? Why is Shafter seem a little safer than other communities? There's really, the secret ingredient is how active your police officers are. And if they're active, the dispatches are active, records is active, everybody's active. That there's no secret to it. So we want to try to make sure that gradually we invite more staff in so that we keep that ratio right where it needs to be. That is my presentation, and I will field any questions if you have any.
Hey, Chief, so there's no other positions going to be filled besides the captain's position, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You know, with the ever-growing need, which you discussed right here, especially with our growing demands in Gossamer Grove and the outlying areas, and with the pending release of all these convicted felons, it's going to be pretty tough on you guys. So any kind of reduction, I don't. That's why I wanted to ask that question. You guys are doing a great job right now, being very proactive, and I want to continue seeing that. That 76,000 is a very real number, especially with 2 prisons being closed by next year, and then possibly more to come after that. So, and they're just going to keep spreading them out into the communities, and it's going to affect every single person in here. I guarantee you that. They're going to be out, and the credits that they're receiving right now, which for good behavior in prison, is going to go up to what they call 33% now. So they're going to get about 33% good behavior time. So it's going to cut down their sentences quite a bit.
It might be good to mention at this time too, on the patrol, excuse me, in the patrol vehicles, we have always each year included purchasing 2 vehicles. And I realize this last year was an exception, but shouldn't that be an automatic deal? Even though we're getting these now, we should be having it considered even for the next time.
Madam Mayor, that's pretty much the way it's been
Yes.
going. Last year was a little special. You know, I mentioned earlier that it takes a long process to actually get a car even after you order it.
Right.
Well, last year was one of those special instances where it was taking an extra long time. So I went ahead and made the decision to forego the vehicles for last year for the good of the order, and then ask for them again this year.
Right. Do we have anybody that's doubling them with a vehicle? We don't have 1 vehicle per person.
We do have 1 vehicle per person.
We currently do.
We
Okay.
do.
Because I know we're still looking for positions too, aren't we?
We are. We have Matt Sanchez coming in next week. We have 1 young lady that's been given a conditional offer, so she's in the hiring process, and another in the background, a little further back in the background process. And then after that, there's still 1 vacancy.
So are you going to have to double up, or do you have extra cars?
I think we're going to make it. I'm going to use some of the old cars here in the core, and we're already using a vehicle from the CCF. From my admin team is using one. We're just using it. So we're making adjustments. We'll make it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Chief,
Chief.
what is an average for a life span of a vehicle for the police force?
Well, usually we start looking at 100,000 miles. However, I mean, it just depends. Right now, we have what's called a take-home vehicle program. So those miles are going to increase more so than they did years previously. So we might have a patrol vehicle previously that has far fewer miles, but is older in years. And as you know, a vehicle, no matter what, when they get older in years, is going to break down. So
I was just curious, what do they average a year? 25, 30,000
easily,
easy?
yep.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Chief, how many Crown Vics you got left?
I think we have 4. They
4?
look good.
Honorable Mayor, members of the Chapter City Council, Michael James, Director of Public Works. I'm going to be covering our department's role in the draft budget for next fiscal year. That's going to maintain existing service levels and construct critical projects. But I'm also going to be covering some additional needs not covered in the draft budget that, if approved, will put the city in a much better position to meeting the infrastructure needs and obligations for the city. Before we look forward, I'd like to cover some notable accomplishments for the fiscal year that's wrapping up. It's project focused. City well number 9 is located at the high school. It's an inactive well. It's been inactive for a good 30 years due to water quality concerns. It's not suitable for drinking water, but we have equipped it with a new pumping system that will meet the recreational needs, irrigation needs for the recreation fields at the high school as well as Mantle Park. And we're partnering with the high school district to construct pipelines that'll link the well with these recreation fields. And we hope to have some progress to report on that effort in the coming weeks. Moving on to the water system, we're wrapping up the coating of tank number 2. Tank number 2 is located immediately south of the correctional facility. We're coating the inside and the outside of the tank to reduce the buildup of corrosion and sediment, which will hopefully make this tank maintenance-free for a good 20+ years. Moving on to parks, I think the council is very familiar with the outdoor fitness court that was assembled at Mantle Park. In fact, we're having a dedication Saturday at 11 o'clock. That was funded with the state grant. That same state grant is funding a refurbishment of the volleyball court also at Mantle Park. Moving on to streets, the notable accomplishments are the James Street Phase 2 project that took place between Central Avenue and Shafter Avenue, as well as the reconstruction of Zerker Road that took place between the Bryant Kern Canal and the Callaway Canal. Now, next fiscal year promises to be a lot more active than this current fiscal year, I guarantee you. Starting with the West Beltway project that will provide a secondary access point for 7th Standard Road for the wonderful industrial park. And speaking of 7th Standard Road, the city engineer has developed a multi-phase plan to resurface and reconstruct the pavement lanes at 7th Standard Road between the wonderful industrial park and Gossamer Grove. And we're planning the first phase to take place in front of Gossamer Grove. Moving on to core city residential streets, we're engineering construction projects to improve drainage at Pozo Avenue between Walker and Kern Street. We have a significant reconstruction of East Euclid planned, and we're also looking into the feasibility of adding streetlights to the North Shafter communities. In addition to construction projects, our engineers plan to play a very active role in regional transportation planning. We will continue to be the lead agency for the 7th Standard Road widening Phase 2 between Galpin Street and Highway 43. And we will also play a very active role in the cargo initiative, which is basically a collaboration amongst other agencies, including Bakersfield and the county, to ensure that we have roadways that are master planned for current and future traffic needs. Moving on to parks, we have another state grant that will add amenities at Mantle Park, mostly covered shade picnic areas, as well as a new irrigation system. The typical sewer system improvements, the highlights of those include a replacement of the Central Valley Highway lift station and hopefully extensive manhole coating. And as far as the water system goes, we plan to design and permit at least 2 wells to add to the distribution system. One of those wells is located at the wonderful industrial park, and the second well will be located in North Shafter in very close proximity to the proposed park site. And after several years of planning and strategizing, we're finally going to break ground on solar panel additions to 5 city facilities, 4 of which are water sites. The other is the animal control facility. And one big highlight of the water system operation this year is that we're going to make a giant leap, make a lot of significant progress, I should say, with respect to becoming a fully metered water system, which is required by 2025. Essentially, we have 2,000 water services that lack a meter for billing purposes. And this particular fiscal year, we want to address at least half of those. Finally, with all the activity we have planned, we feel it's essential to update our bidding and procurement policies. The policies we rely on now were developed 30 years ago, I believe, and they don't allow us to leverage current technology, emails, the internet, or any kind of online resources to do bidding and procurement. We want to address that. And we also want to address a lack of inflation when it comes to budgetary authority for critical staff members. Rather than provide multiple tables and with comparisons with past fiscal year spending activity, I'm just going to provide a summary of our planned operational costs within the department amongst our operating divisions, that are categorized personnel, operation, and maintenance costs, et cetera. So essentially, Public Works is a $13 million operation. And going into this fiscal year, water accounts for half of that. This slide provides a multi-year comparison of capital improvement program activity. The first column is actuals for fiscal year 1920. The second column is a projection for the current fiscal year. And the third column is a forecast for all of this coming fiscal year. So as you can see, just based on the monetary amounts listed in the grand total, you're going to see a significant uptick in construction activity looking forward. Now, at the council's most recent strategic planning workshop, I think staff and council concurred that infrastructure is a top priority, not the top priority, but a top priority. It's right up there with education and public safety. So to fulfill the infrastructure needs for the city, Public Works sees a need to have additional resources beyond the current fiscal year budget as drafted. Last calendar year, each department was tasked with performing an informal organizational capacity assessment, which basically asked us to compare current staffing levels versus optimum staffing levels to meet the current workload. And so in the case of Public Works, based on this breakdown by operating division, we have a staff of 28, and we really need a staff of 35 to do the job that we're doing effectively on a long-term basis. So we're essentially operating at 80% capacity at this time. The divisions highlighted in gray are going to be the focus of our additional staffing needs that I'm going to cover now. So as far as additional staffing goes, Public Works is proposing to hire 2 people, and they're listed by priority on this slide. The first and top priority is the addition of a clerk typist. The purpose, or the primary purpose of this position, is to relieve the administrative assistant that we've hired of her Munis ERP responsibilities, which basically consist of processing invoices and requisitions. Now, the administrative assistant was hired specifically to deal with Munis, but now that we have a good year and a half of Munis under our belt, we're seeing to see exactly what's involved in that type of position. And since December, the administrative assistant we have processed 4,300 invoices herself, which is admirable. But the challenge is that she's unable to support the director and other department staff with other administrative assistants. And lost opportunities that I foresee involve contract administration as well as grant applications. There is a numerous amount of grant opportunities that are available to the city that I think the administrative assistant is better suited leading or preparing on behalf of the department rather than focusing on Munis. So the clerk typist would be taking on those duties. And that is an $80,000 cost annually to the budget. Half of that, is attributed to benefits, this standard city benefits, health coverage, and the retirement plan. So as a potential cost savings measure, the department is willing to consider a part-time alternative that'll eliminate that cost. Now, the challenge with the part-time position is that it'll probably be harder to recruit. And I believe part-time hours are capped. So our production will be capped as well. And coming in at a close second with staffing needs is an engineer one, a new engineer one, which is basically an entry-level engineer, a postgraduate engineer, at a cost of $140,000 annually. The purpose of this position would be to provide additional in-house support for the city engineer and reduce our dependency on consulting services and contracted engineering work, which I believe this fiscal year is on track to exceed $200,000. Now, this position won't eliminate that cost, but it'll significantly reduce it. And secondly, it factors into our growth and succession plan within a department. Additional needs beyond staffing is pretty straightforward. We're proposing to purchase a mini excavator, just basically adding a new tool to the toolbox. This particular unit on the top right of your screen will be excellent to work in tight working spaces, and such as installing water meters in residential alleys, which we had to look forward to this fiscal year. We're also proposing to replace one of our aging dump trucks. We have 2 dump trucks that are a good 20, 25 years old, if not older. And as you can imagine, replacement parts and servicing the trucks is sometimes challenging and not cost effective. So this particular fiscal year, we're proposing to replace one of those. And starting this fiscal year, we're proposing to establish a reoccurring budget line item to address improvements at the corporation yard. In a nutshell, we don't want the new corp yard to look like the old corp yard anytime soon. So we'd rather invest in it on an annual basis to make sure that it's functioning and it's aesthetically pleasing. And our first priority, if this funding is approved, would be to improve the appearance of the engineering GIS office as you enter the facility with a new paint job and possibly landscaping. Well, future budget needs identified, but ones that can be deferred for future consideration include staffing. For one example is a fleet supervisor to work with the existing mechanic we have at the new vehicle shop to make the processing and maintenance of vehicles a lot more efficient. And streets maintenance is a full-time job now. In the old days, it used to be seasonal. You would have an annual sealing program and you would respond to potholes, not necessarily every day, but now we're at a position with Laredo Highway, 7 Standard Road, Santa Fe Way, and everything else that's being added to the city that we really need street foreman full-time to lead pavement crews with repair and maintenance work. And as all of us have alluded to, the city is growing and we're adding facilities at a rapid rate. So in general, field operations will need to be expanded to keep up with demand and the expectations with these new facilities. Gossamer Grove, for example, I think we've doubled the amount of parks we have in just the last 5 or 6 years. So with public facilities, I think we're very aware that the aquatic center is not operating due to the lack of, COVID for one thing, but the lack of an operations agreement. Fortunately, the city manager and I have been hosting conversations with the rec district, school districts, and other pool stakeholders to discuss the possibility of bringing that pool back to life. And in the coming weeks, we could have some possible scenarios to consider, and that ultimately lead to the pool perhaps being back in business as early as next calendar year. Now, the council may remember that we had CDBG funding programmed for the aquatic center that was going to go towards a covered picnic area. And we obviously had to find a different use for that money because of the state of the pool agreement. So in addition to utilizing those CDBG funds, we're thinking about consolidating other rounds of CDBG funding for one large project that could take place at Veterans Park. It seems to be the most ideal location based on the community needs and the feedback that we're getting from the public. And we're looking at roughly 400,000 combined that could go towards a soccer field lighting as well as a basketball court. And then finally, with respect to public services, we don't have a choice on this one. By the end of this calendar year, we not only have to develop, but implement an action plan for SB 1383 compliance. Basically, we have to offer organic waste diversion programs that we lack throughout the city. The outlying areas at Gossamer and Minter Field and wonderful industrial park will likely just amend the franchise hauling agreements we have. But here in the core city, it'll be a game changer because we have to ultimately require the core city residents to have a green waste container. And right now we're developing a request for proposals to have franchise haulers tell us what those additional services will cost. And by this fall, we'll have an action plan and a new rate plan to move forward with, hopefully. So that concludes Public Works' presentation. A lot to cover, but a lot to look forward to. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mike, I had a question on the water well that you said was no longer good for drinking water. What changed there?
Initially, before my time, the well was deactivated because of a DBCP, which was an organic contaminant. It was detected in the mid to late 80s. And within the last about 5 to 8 years ago, we ran some pump testing to see exactly where the water quality levels were at to see if we could possibly bring that back into service. Well, unfortunately, we were free of DBCP, but we had nitrate levels that exceeded the health standard. So over the last few years, we've engineered the pumping system to focus solely on irrigation for the needs of the high school and Mantle Park, which is unfortunate it can't be used for drinking water, but it will significantly reduce the demands on the water system and free up drinking water for traditional use rather than having it used for irrigating fields.
Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council, I'm Dennis Fiddler over the Building Division. This past year, it's been extremely busy. It's had to be one of our busiest years and most fruitful years ever with everything that's happened. So some of the accomplishments in front of you, I'm sure you guys are well aware of. They take months, if not years, to come to fruition, and months, if not years, to actually construct most of these big projects that you're going to see. The first one is the Amazon facility. This year, I think we're announced that Amazon came in as a tenant in the existing 1 million square foot that we built the previous year, and they're investing well over $150 million inside the facility and some exterior improvements. As well, just across the street to the south, we just started construction on a new 1 million square foot shell that will be under construction throughout this year and hopefully be completed in the beginning parts of 2022. And then at the entrance of the industrial park, obviously the wellness center is and the amenity complex is under construction. There's 5 buildings under construction. And it'll be a nice addition to the park. It's called the Amenity Center, so hopefully we'll see nice amenities there. I know we will. It's a beautiful complex, so I think we'll be proud of it when it's done. As well, we have a 3,600 square foot corner market with a fuel island on the corner of Zerker and Lerdo. It'll be a nice addition as well. And we've permitted 270 new single family residences this year, completed the 600,000 square foot fully automated cold storage facility for Walmart, and we completed major tenant improvements for Ross Dress for Less. As for the upcoming goals, one of the items on our plate is to update the floodplain management ordinance as required by FEMA. We don't have any major changes here in Shafter, but we still are required to update the ordinance. We need to update the special inspection policies to be in accordance with current codes and standards. One of the items we need to look at is increasing staffing levels necessary for current and projected workload demands. Hopefully with COVID slightly going away, we can attend necessary training to maintain the CEUs for the inspection certifications. And then, a big item in front of us is the land management system. At an opportune time, we need to implement that. Unfortunately, it's hard to implement it when we're this busy, but it is something on the radar. And then the last item is improve interactions with other agencies and other departments. So as for the building department budget, essentially it's status quo with the addition of a building inspector position. But I want to point out, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, you can see that's when the uptick started in 2018, 2019 in the revenue side. We created essentially $1.2 million. The following year, about $1 million of revenue. Last year, or this current year's budget was budgeted at 827. And if you look to the far right, almost to the far right, we're projected at 1.7 million. We're really close to that. We'll probably see 1.6 to 1.7 somewhere in there. So you can see it's a large uptick. Prior to 2018, 2019 budget, our average annual revenue was about $600,000. So that's where we see this big increase over the past 3 to 4 years. This year's projected budget is 1.1 million. And again, it's a conservative view. We feel that it's going to be much larger than that, but we took the information we had at time when we prepared it, and that's what we came up with. I'll talk about more when we do additional needs. The personnel cost is essentially the same. You can see it across the board with the addition of the building inspector 2 position, and then there's some cost increases for merit and COLA in there. The operations and maintenance is essentially the same. There's a little bit of ISF funds for, I think, IT and liability in there. But overall, it's a status quo budget minus the building inspector 2 position. The additional needs request, the most important in my eyes is the building professional services increase for $155,000. And just to sum that up for you guys, over the past 20 years, the past 2 decades at the wonderful industrial park, we've built like 9 to 10 million square feet of construction out there. And so there's 9 to 10 million square feet of activity that's happened over 2 decades. And what we know in front of us today is potentially they could build 5.5 million over the next 1.5 to 2 years. If that hits us, yeah, we got a tidal wave in front of us. And so the 155,000 is for professional services to do plan reviews. If we spend that money, there's a much larger revenue coming in. So we collect revenue for building permits and plan checks for everything that happens. So if we spend 155, we're going to see 500,000 to 600,000 of additional revenue. So that 1.1 conservative number of revenue would be 1.7, 1.8. So again, I can assure you we won't spend it unless these projects come in. But we have good insight that possibly before mid-year budget, we're going to see some of these trickle in. So that's the request for the 155,000. The second request is a code enforcement professional services increase in amount of $10,000. In my eyes, it seems very minimal. Currently, our budget is only $1,000. And our goal is to get voluntary compliance on anything we do. But if someone doesn't give us voluntary compliance, we have to go abate the nuisance. So if we have weeds out there and someone doesn't take care of them, we have to go do it. This past year or this current year we're in right now, we abated 4 of them. The average was $1,200, and we spent a total of $4,300. So we're asking for $10,000 in the event someone doesn't take care of their property. We go abate the nuisance and we lien the property. So eventually, hopefully we get that money back. And the last item in front of you is the future budget discussion item. It's going to be for the reclassification of the chief of the building official to the chief building official. This is just to create succession planning within the department. it was brought up to be a good idea for organizational capacity. And yeah, I think something in the future, I think more importantly, is to create capacity within the department so we don't lose some of our current staff. Like Gabriel mentioned in the beginning, it's hard to find the right staff, but more important, how do we keep the staff we have? And currently I can tell you they're getting poached, and we have the potential of some of them wanting to leave, and we can't allow that to happen. So there is a need for this organizational capacity, especially with the growth that we have in our department. So that's the last item I have. I'm here to answer any questions. So.
With the addition of the one dentist, how many, that's a weird question. How many will you have on staff once you fill that void? It's still gonna be the same, correct? Like you're still gonna have a need for one more. Am I missing something?
Yes, we are. And yeah, so we're just essentially filling a spot that's vacant right now. But we're hoping to fill that spot here shortly too, if possible. Currently, we don't have authority to fill it, so we may have to wait till that position's vacant, or do a contractual position, which we can do too.
So just so I'm on the same page, this piece we're talking about here is a fill of a currently vacant position, not a fill of a new position that's needed.
No, so yeah, we're interviewing currently. We've interviewed currently, and we think we found a candidate, and that is for a new position. But we currently have one of our inspectors out.
Correct. So there's really it's almost like a backfill.
Yes.
We still need to be reviewing for a secondary, which would theoretically be what you're looking for, is to fill that additional position.
Yes.
Okay. I want to make sure I'm on the same page with you. Thank you.
Dennis, I have a question.
Sure.
How do you predict or see the future going? I mean, what do we use as parameters to know that the continued growth that we have is going to continue on the scale that we're going? How do we know that? Or what's a good factor in considering, the growth and what's going on?
Yeah, it's hard to, Councilmember Espinoza, it's hard to read the market, but I think one of the things we have at hand is good partnerships with the wonderful industrial park staff and Gossamer Grove, and knowing what their projections are. So just as an example, I can't tell you the future of how the market's going to take the residential market. I can't tell you how that's going to happen, but I can tell you that last year we built 180 some homes. This year, or the previous year, 180 some homes. This current year we built 270, and they have 400 projected for this current year we're in now. So we can see the growth, and we know the growth of what Gossamer Grove has. We know the growth of potential of Mission Lakes, and we know the growth of what's going to happen here in the core. We've had a hole in the core that we haven't filled, but with the track 7318 up on Tulare and a few other developers looking at other tracks that are tentative right now, I think we're going to see that market expand a little bit, as well as, again, the partnerships with the wonderful industrial park staff. We know that there's a lot of big projects on kind of on their radar. Now, we don't know if they're all going to come to fruition, but just so you guys know, there's probably 8 to 12 large projects. And again, they equate to 5.5 million square feet. That's 50% of what we built over the last 20 years. So even if 3 of those, so the number we came up with at 155 is only 3 of those projects. If all those projects came in, we'd be back for additional funds, because we couldn't do it with the 155. But realistically, we thought, hey, let's start with 3 of them. It makes sense what will come in by mid-year, and at mid-year, if we need to come back and change things, we will.
Okay, so the indicators are there.
Yes, they sure are.
Okay, thank you.
Dennis, you're not being fair either because the indicators aren't just for Shafter. The indicators are for Kern County in this area. And if you listen to KEDC, and Bob was in on the last meeting too, I mean, they're having requests and they're having interest coming from all over. And it specifically hits not just 7th Standard, but in the Kern County area. So California is definitely, they're going to see a certain amount, even though we have issues in the state. But yeah, they're really looking to locate out of other areas to come here. So yeah, we're bound to get more of it. I'm
Yeah.
convinced. Yeah.
I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm gonna cut it as quick as I can here because I know we all need to get breaks before 6. So good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the Shafter City Council. I want to review the information technology and the telecommunications budgets with you this evening. Some accomplishments. These are combined with both departments. I will review the budgets individually, but the COVID-19 was a fun time, but the department worked tirelessly to acquire equipment and prepare systems for the remote workforce throughout the year to be able to do their jobs and maintain continuity of operations. And with the help of leadership team and a lot of imagination and ingenuity, the team implemented the new online audiovisual streaming system we're using today, which I think works pretty darn well. By expanding cloud services used like upgrades to Microsoft Office 365 services, foundation has been laid to help staff operate collaboratively and effectively, no matter where they may be working. And with the design and implementation work of staff, CenturyLink was able to begin deploying their internet services to the first customers within the wonderful industrial park. Some goals for this coming year, in order to focus on security improvements where they will be the most effective, we plan to perform an organizational-wide cybersecurity risk assessment. And we'll develop a multi-year fiber network strategic plan to bring Shafter Connect internet services to more areas within the city core. As well, we plan to allow for the installation of public Wi-Fi services and security camera protection. We will complete the creation of a pre-designed dedicated network throughout the Shafter Connect network infrastructure. The information technology budget, the proposed revenues this year, well, revenues and expenditures, because they're the same as an internal service fund, is $881,756. And that is divided amongst all the other departments. Some of the differences, the increases in hardware and software maintenance are mostly due to 2-year and 3-year maintenance renewals on those services. So they fluctuate from year to year. Professional services has increased by 10,000, and that was to allow for consulting services to aid in implementing security protocols. And the internet services reduced about 18,000 this year, and that's just delaying a upgrade to our backup internet and voice service circuits. Telecommunications budget revenues are projected at or proposed for this year. Actually, that's technically projected at $208,584. That is an increase of approximately 12.5% from this year's projected, which was also an increase of about 12.5% over last. So we are seeing some increase there. And the thing to note on the 177,000 loss that is proposed for this year, if you look at the previous years, you'll see this 2021 fiscal year, we actually have a projected gain of a little over $2,000, even though the projected loss was about the same last year based on the budget. And that is because the capital outlay expenditures in that fund are only expended when there's services ordered that require new equipment be ordered for it. And we have a significant supply of parts for deployments of internet services currently too. So I don't expect a whole lot of expenditure in this account next year, but it's there in case we get the orders. Additional needs requests. The first one is for the purchase of an enhanced secure hybrid backup system. During the ransomware attack we had a few months ago, as you may know, one of our 2 backup systems was fully encrypted by the malicious actors, and it wouldn't have taken much for them to find and encrypt the other system as well. And that's because they're basically Windows servers that we built and then installed backup software on. This system that I'm proposing to you is built from the ground up with immutability. And that is the ability or the inability for any of the data that's been previously backed up to be changed from anywhere on the network. So if a malicious actor got into our network like they did with ransomware, they wouldn't even be able to see that machine there, the backup machine that is. So the only way for them to get in and destroy that data is if they have one of our protected administrator accounts, which we're also going to protect with the 2-factor authentication that we have recently implemented for administrative accounts. So that system comes at a total cost for a 3-year maintenance agreement of $96,000, just a little under that. And in the 4th year and beyond, we expect the maintenance fees, software and hardware maintenance fees to be around $23,000 annually. But I believe that will significantly improve our odds of not losing our backups in another attack. And I can't say I'm that confident in the current system. So the other request I bring before you today is for a new position, an information technology specialist 1. And basically to summarize this quickly is this position will take the responsibility, some of the responsibilities that our specialist 2, which is Johnny, is performing now. It will shift those to the 2 level 1 technicians that we would have. And both of our current technicians are spending most of their time just managing user requests and break fix problems with cameras going down or MDCs having issues and so forth. And so that puts that doesn't give them much time to maintain our systems. So updates that are needed to be done, security and otherwise, are difficult to get done in the time we have. And so by giving some of the specialist 2 position responsibilities to the new 2 level 1 technicians, then that specialist 2 would be freed up to do more of the server maintenance, installation of updates. And also I plan to give my tasks that I've been doing on the fiber network system, the management of the day-to-day functions of it, to the level 2 technician as well. And that will free me up then to do more strategic planning for the city, for the IT, for doing policies and procedure creation, and helping to drive the expansion of our fiber network as well into the core city. I might go on to the future discussion items. we're planning, as I said, to do the cybersecurity risk assessment. And I plan to come back to council. It'll probably be towards the end of the year, end of Q2, fiscal year Q2, and report what we found and if there are any additional needs to implement the top security items needed. The other thing with the Shafter Connect network operations, I'm still evaluating options for improving the operations of that network and what we need to do with it. So I hope to come back to you in the next couple of council meetings with a recommendation for that as well. Are there any questions?
I didn't want to be recorded. Okay, so we're going to adjourn this meeting very quickly here, and then we're going to have to open up the other one once everybody comes in. So I know we have food in the other room. I don't know that anyone is starved to death, but we may have to put it off until after our meeting is complete. So I'll ask a motion, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We are adjourned.